And Singapore to allow a further 20,000 vehicles onto its roads, with more certificates of entitlement to become available early next year. And we have two experts on the issue with us in the studio today. Associate Professor Walter Theseira is from the School of Business at SUSS, and Dr Samuel Chng is Research Assistant Professor at the Kuan Youth Centre for Innovative Cities at SUTD. Professor Theseira, Dr Chng, welcome to the studio. Thanks for being here. Professor Theseira, I think the main question, the big question that everyone wants to ask is, will the extra 20,000 COEs make a difference to COE premium prices? Is it enough to meet demand and cool prices here?
Sure. So first, I think I want to make clear that I think policymakers in Singapore do not target a given level of COE prices. That's actually for the market to determine. But what policymakers do have an interest in is in setting a supply of COEs that is stable and predictable. Because once you have that kind of stability that is provided by COE supply, and especially if you can distribute the overall quota of COEs over a 10-year period more evenly year on year, that is the process which will contribute towards more stable pricing in the long run. Because what we found historically is that COE prices are very strongly correlated with COE supply. When you have low COE supply years, as in the last couple of years and this year, you have very high prices. But when you've got higher COE supply years, which is what will happen towards the end of this decade, you will see that prices will come down a lot. So for this 20,000 COE quota to make a difference, it would likely have to be added more in the earlier part of this period. So that is more next year and more in 2026. And that will help to stabilize the COE supply. And the consequence of that is that prices should stabilize. But it's not actually the target. The real target is to stabilize supply over the cycle.
So this is bound to happen, as you said earlier, right? And authorities say there is still going to be a zero growth rate for cars and motorcycles. But this increase of 20,000, is it some sort of growth in vehicle population? Help us make sense of this.
So adding 20,000 does, of course, increase the overall vehicle population in Singapore, but there is a bit of a difference in how LTA is doing it this time versus, for example, implementing a percentage increase in the vehicle growth rate. The difficulty with the percentage increase in the vehicle growth rate is that it basically used to be implemented as a straight increase quarter and quarter in the vehicle population. And that meant that you were not able to calibrate it to when you actually needed those vehicles actually supplied, right, in order to moderate or stabilize supply. So, for example, if you were to implement a certain percentage increase in the car population over the next couple of years, what would happen is that increase would likely be too little for 2025 and 2026, but it might be too much for the later part of the period when you already have a lot of supply coming in and you're just adding more supply and making peak actually worse. So I think with this 20,000 number, LTA has a bit more flexibility to choose when they want to put it in. They haven't declared when, of course, but my own view is that it's better for it to come in earlier rather than later.
Dr. Chng, let's bring you in here. Pollution and traffic congestion, these are some common issues for big cities around the world. How would we deal with these issues if we are allowing 20,000 more vehicles on the road?
I think first we get to understand that the travel patterns have changed in the last few years. So what we have seen from the statistics is that the vehicle distance driven has actually reduced in the last 5 years. And also we see that public transport ridership is increasing post-pandemic, and it's almost probably around the same level as pre-pandemic times, as well as the expansion of our rail networks and bus services. So people are normalizing to a new type of travel pattern. Okay? And this might mean that drivers might be driving slightly lesser based on what we see from the numbers. Yeah. And so what we can then expect is then there are slightly lesser vehicles, or traffic is slightly lesser on the roads. And we can even see from the ERP gantries compared to pre-pandemic, today we don't have all the gantries up in operation. That suggests that the traffic on the road may not be at the same level as before.
So road habits have essentially changed since COVID in particular. But this increase, doesn't it also go against the government's car light policy and encouragement for more people to actually use public transport?
So I think car light goes beyond having lesser cars or a fixed number of cars on the road, right? But car light is really a lifestyle choice where people, even if you own cars, you could actually choose not to take the car, right? You could have a public transport as a means of alternative. You could choose to leave your car at home, right? And to choose a more sustainable and environmentally friendly mode of transport. That said, also, there are initiatives and incentives given for ICE vehicles to be phased out and for drivers to now purchase more sustainable or environmentally friendly vehicles, electric vehicles. And we see an expansion in terms of the infrastructure that's available to support this, as well as the incentives that are available today. So hopefully this helps to shift and move us towards a car light vision, encouraging people who do not really need the vehicle to take alternative modes. And for those who need the vehicle, then to consider when and where to drive to.
Professor Theseira, can distance-based charging with ERP 2.0 eventually help us to do away with the COE system of car ownership, essentially?
So I think one of the challenges of the current COE system of car ownership is that it actually shifts all of your costs, a very large portion of your costs for owning and operating a car upfront into the price that you pay when you buy the car. And that's already one problem, right? Because you have to set aside a lot of capital, or you have to borrow a lot of money to buy a car. But in addition to loading all the costs in front, we also find that because of the way that the COE supply cycle is operated, the cost of buying a car has varied hugely depending on when in the cycle you buy it, right? So COE prices can fluctuate from over $100,000 to, less than $50,000, all in the span of a decade. And that's very undesirable, actually, because it gives no certainty to businesses in terms of their business costs. And of course, for a private owner, you feel like you're kind of playing a lottery, when you're trying to figure out when to buy a car. So what the good thing then about ERP2, about moving to an expanded road pricing system, is that it gives us a lot more tools for dealing with the actual consequence of people owning cars. Because it's not owning cars which is the policy problem, it is using the car. If all of us choose to use the car at the same place, same time in Singapore, nobody will be able to get anything done. So ERP2 allows us to more flexibly respond to these kinds of congestion hotspots, developments, and so on, which will be hard to predict. And with the old ERP system, we could only respond to those issues with a huge time lag. We had to identify the area, we had to put in a gantry there. All of this took a huge amount of time. So we wouldn't have the confidence in the old system to dare revising upwards our vehicle ownership too much. With the new system, we can actually have that confidence once we implement the system fully, and once we get some experience actually implementing more dynamic and better road pricing and seeing how motorists actually respond to that.
Right, there's no decision yet on whether to implement distance-based charging at this point, according to LTA. But Dr. Chng, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this offers an opportunity for LTA to manage the vehicle usage in a more dynamic manner, right? So as Walter pointed out, it's not about the ownership or not about the issue of people having cars per se, but it's when and where they use the cars, right? So I think we have to take it more holistically, and we really want to encourage people, even if they own cars, to consider alternative users, right? And to use their cars wisely in that sense, even though they have it, but they could consider other alternatives. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Chng, Professor Theseira, thank you very much for coming into the studio to talk to us. That was Associate Professor Walter Theseira from the School of Business at SUSS and Dr. Samuel Chng, Research Assistant Professor at the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities at SUTD.